Hello and welcome to Not One Right Way, the podcast. My name is Melissa Manuel, she, her, and I'm here with my co-host.
Marv de Motowaking Yaga, they, them, theirs.
How you doing, Marv? It's been a while.
It has been a couple of weeks. I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
Happy belated birthday by like 2 days.
Yeah, thank you. I'm still celebrating. I've got a bottle of mead that I'm working my way through. Delightful little present for me.
I love that for you.
Thank you.
Got your pie, your gluten-free pie.
Yes. The pairing of the gluten-free apple pie with like the lactose-free vanilla ice cream and the mead. Like, heavenly. I felt like a little Renaissance lordling. Like, somewhere in Italy, I would have been having the time of my life several centuries ago.
I'm so happy for you. That's what you deserve. I'm glad you got those little treats for your birthday.
Thank you.
Sounds very nice.
It has been pretty nice, yeah.
Are you watching anything fun?
I recently started watching a K-drama with my mom.
Back to the K-dramas?
Yes. She's a public school teacher, so she recently started her summer vacation, and she's been telling me, "We just have to wait till May, we just have to wait till the end of May, and then we can start another K-drama." So, that's good.
Happy for her.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Yes. So, turning it over to you, how are you doing? What are you watching?
Oh, I'm doing okay. It's a bit of a time. Unemployment is weird, as you know. But otherwise, really distracting myself with content. I was struggling to think about what to talk about because I'm watching so much stuff. It's like, oh God. I do want to shout out, just like rapid fire. I watched these 2 new Cartoon Network shows, Yanu and Invincible Fight Girl. Definitely recommend watching both, just because it's like original stories, like, and they're like Black stories on Cartoon Network, and like always gotta elevate original content by people of color. So those were great. Still watching Hacks, love it. Like I think my favorite season. They're really digging in deep into the characters, so that's good too. And then of course the one we're sort of watching together, Devil's Plan on Netflix.
Yes.
Craziest Korean reality show where people are so smart and the games are so complicated. But
Yeah.
I'm all in. I'm so invested.
Yes.
So that's my range right now.
Yeah. Me and Melissa did this fun thing where we watched season 2 first and then went back to watch season 1. Because obviously, you don't need the context of season 1 to enjoy season 2. But watching season 1, it's just like, whoa, these are the same show, but the intensity is so different. It's like, how about we torment these people in season 2? Just like humiliate them on TV.
This isn't the time or the space to talk about how messed up season 2 of Devil's Plan is compared to like the game design of it. I'm mad about it.
Yeah. Not the time.
But this is a great segue. Speaking of game design. I'm so good at segues. To our incredible guest, I am so excited to finally have her here with us. Her name is Alayna Cole. They are a game educator and DEI expert. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. We're so excited to have you.
Yeah. I do have a quick question. I saw you drinking a Red Bull earlier, and I just want to set some context. Like, what time is it there for you? Because it's 9 p.m. where I'm at, and I'm just like, I immediately was just like taken aback, like Red Bull at 9 p.m.
So I'm based in Australia, so it's 1 p.m. tomorrow for me.
Okay.
But I also tend to drink a fair bit of Red Bull. Like I'll nurse a can all day because I have fibromyalgia, which is a chronic pain condition. And I find caffeine really helps to mitigate my symptoms. So I kind of slowly release caffeine into my system throughout the day, and it helps me kind of stay functional.
Got it. That seems like a very clever way to work with this problem you've got and to be able to do the things you want to do.
Yeah, so I've had fibro since I was 17.
Mhm.
And like this isn't the fibrocast, but it's one of those things that is like a really big part of my life.
Yeah.
Um, and so over the course of the last 15 or so years, I've had to work out ways that I can still, be a functional human and get things done while also dealing with this and being okay with it.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
That's okay. It's not a secret. It'd be a very hard thing to keep a secret, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
Anyone
Yeah.
who's known me for a little while, there are days where I just cannot function. So,
Yeah.
Makes sense. Well, Marv, do you want to start us off with your hard-hitting question?
Yes. My question for you, as you know, I give you a little bit of context. I'm a social worker. A lot of the time, I'm meeting somebody for the first time, and it's like, tell me everything about you, including your medical history, and which can be a little off putting. So, my hard hitting question of the day for you is if you were a pie, what kind of pie would you be?
it's an interesting question. There are so many different things to consider with that question. So, let me give me my train of thought, so I'm not just sitting here thinking silently to myself while I try to decide. Apple
Mhm.
pie is my favorite pie. So, do I go with my favorite pie? Meat pie is the most stereotypically Australian pie. No one else does a meat pie quite like an Australian, and I am Australian. But I also don't really like meat pie. So I'm like, do
Mm.
I go with the thing I don't like just because it captures part of who I am? Not sure, not sure. I think I will go apple pie just because I do like it so much. But one of those like really like when you get an apple pie and then they haven't put like buttloads of sugar in it, it's actually quite like tart and like
Mhm.
really like yeah, that sort of, like, really, like, full of fruit, very tart, hasn't been totally drenched in sugar. That is what I am. We'll go with that.
Nice.
Love that answer.
Yeah. Melissa, what kind of pie do you think you'd be?
I went through, like, not the 5 stages of grief, but, like, multiple thought processes when you asked that question. 'Cause it when, you brought up meat pies, and I was like, "Oh, dang, don't bring savory into this, because now it's a whole other ballgame." But the musical Waitress does
Yeah.
this really cute thing throughout the show. If you are familiar with it, it's about this woman who's pregnant and she bakes pies really good. That's like it's oversimplification. But and throughout the songs, she'll like make a pie to like work through her feelings and she'll name them really funny things. And I have the cookbook of the pies from the show. So she'll be like, I'm in deep, deep shit, something pie. So I'm like, I feel like my pie would have a really silly name and it would probably be a savory pie, like a hand pie.
Mm, lovely.
I don't know. I'll work on the name. I'll workshop it. But it would be something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like for where I'm at right now, I really wish I was like a tart apple pie, like what you're describing, Alana. But I feel like I'm a hostess mini apple pie, which is
Mhm.
actually coated in sugar. Like, I'm actually feeling a little sweet and saucy today. Not really like this is the roots of what I am, but it's like this is a fun little version you can pick up for 50 cents, you know?
Cute. Well, thank you for talking about pie because now I'm very hungry. But we will charge forth through the interview. Alana, why don't you share with us and the listeners a little bit about yourself and how you came to be a game educator and DEI expert? Is that something you knew you wanted to be when you were little, or did you have a different dream job?
This is going to be a much longer answer than the pie one. Um, so
It's okay.
when I was young, I kind of didn't even realize video games was a job. I loved video games. I played video games a lot with my family, especially my dad, but I never really thought about the fact that video games had people that made them. They just sort of were a part of my childhood. My dream job when I was a kid was an author, and then I also progressed into teacher because I was quite a pragmatic kid, and I was like, an author is never going to be able to make enough money to get by, so I'm going to be a teacher and I'll write on the side. This is me at like 8. But when I got into university, I actually went and I did my bachelor in education. I'm qualified as a secondary teacher. I did it alongside a bachelor of English literature. And then I went into doing my second, like an additional study, my postgraduate study, and I did my PhD in creative writing. So my little 8-year-old self was pretty correct in terms of teacher, writer. But while I was studying my PhD, I wanted to teach at the university where I was studying, which is, pretty standard. And the creative writing team there didn't have any space for additional teachers at the time. And they were just in the process of starting a games program. I was already spending a lot of time in the games lab. My husband was working in that space, and he wasn't my husband at the time, but we were spending a lot of time together. His lab was cooler than mine, basically. I had access to an office space for creative writers. It was quite dry, and he had access to the game studies lab, which had like a 3D printer and a bunch of computers. It was much more fun. So I went and hung out in there, and I loitered enough that they asked me if I'd come and teach in their narrative design courses to start with. And then I went into their game design courses, and I was doing game-based learning and game studies and all of that stuff. And that kind of developed and developed. And once I finished my PhD, I decided that if I wanted to keep working in like academia and the university space, I really, really wanted the industry experience to support my students better. And so when I finished my PhD, I applied for an industry job, and I got it as a producer at an independent studio. Within the year that I was there, they closed and all of us were made redundant. Very common story for people who work in this industry. And so I had to find myself another gig, and I was very lucky and was offered a job working as a producer at Sledgehammer Games. So I went from indie into AAA. I spent just a bit over 5 years working at Sledge. I spent half of that as a producer and then the other half as their DE&I manager, and ran their diversity, equity and inclusion team, built that up. And I left there end of last year, and I'm now back in the games education space, bringing all that industry experience and supporting a next generation of game developers, which is awesome. And in there, I also ran a not-for-profit for a while, and I wrote some books and I did some other things. But that's the shorthand version of my journey.
Yeah. I really like the mindset of being very pragmatic of like, well, writer's not gonna make money, so I'm gonna be a teacher. Because that was how I thought of it too, of like, well, my plan B will always be teaching. And that's still kind of my thought process. But
Yeah.
that was kind of like my first thought too. Like, I want to be a writer, but I'm never gonna make money, so I guess I'll teach.
Yeah.
And I've reached a point where I've always loved teaching. It was why it was part of my plan. But one of the things I found out once I went to uni is that part of the job of a lecturer is to write as well as to teach.
Mm.
And so it's kind of this perfect role for me because I get to spend half my time in the classroom working with students, which I absolutely adore. And then I get to spend the other half of my time doing research and kind of furthering study in a field that I care about at this really high level in a much more kind of specialized way than you do when you're, working in, say, a high school where you're teaching kind of broad introductory English. That kind of specialization aspect is really appealing to me. And so now I'm literally doing a job again that requires me to do both of these things I love, teaching and writing, which is a thing I didn't know existed when I was a kid either, but found and is kind of perfect for me.
Yeah. I had a sort of opposite experience to Melissa, where I got a bachelor's in philosophy, which is immediately unhelpful. In the short term. In the long term, I obviously appreciated my degree. Who knows what I'm going to do with it?
Not that many full-time philosopher jobs going.
No, and I decided pretty early on, like, I actually don't think I could do academia. Like,
Mhm.
I think maybe it's not for me.
Really specialized skill set, and it is one that I absolutely have and love, and I love what
Mhm.
I do. But I do find that you'll have that kind of same thing, Melissa, where you're talking about a second plan or like a plan B. You'll sometimes have industry people come in to teach at a university or in that tertiary education sector for a while, and they go, "Oh no, this is actually much harder than I thought. There's more to this than I realized." Like
Mhm.
it is a very specific skill set.
Yeah.
What would you say that skill set is?
I think that it's that balance of having really good industry knowledge, but also understanding how to translate that industry knowledge into something that someone who has no experience with it can understand and appreciate and kind of wrap their head around. And you'll end up sometimes with people who come in who are like the best artist or the best programmer in their field. But if they don't have that skill of translation, they don't know how to get that really amazing talent that they have into the hands of students in a practical, tangible way, they're not going to be the best teacher in the room. And sometimes you'll have people who are a lot more kind of jack of all trades. They're not a massive specialist. They're not, savant in their area. But if they know how to teach and they know how to teach students how to look up information on their own and how to problem solve and all of those sorts of things, that's going to go a lot further in that classroom setting. And so I think some people have that challenge where they go, oh, I'm an expert in this area. I can absolutely teach it, without realizing that teaching in itself is absolutely a learned skill. And there's a lot of ways to try and do that well.
Yeah. And what has it been like for you going back to teaching after working in the games industry for 5-ish years?
I think that coming back into the university space, it's almost like coming home after a really long vacation. Like, I've been on this trip, I've learned all these skills, I've seen the world, I've experienced all these things, and now I've kind of come back home and I'm finding ways that I'm changing the way I want my day-to-day life to be based on all the things I learned while I was traveling. It's that sort of feeling to me. It's very funny looking back on who I was 6 years ago when I was teaching students and thinking oh, she was a tiny child. But I feel like we will always think that 5 years, 10 years down the track, we will always look back at our past selves and think that they were a baby. But yeah, I think I'm internally grateful for the experience that I had at different size studios, at different levels of responsibility, different scales of project, different sizes of team, working with all these different people. I met some of the most incredible and talented people I could have ever dreamed of over the last 6 years. And all of that knowledge kind of comes with me. So it does kind of just feel like coming back to a really comfortable home, but it's also just with so many souvenirs. I have so much that I can bring to that space now.
Yeah. Awesome.
And can you share a little bit, you mentioned when your overview of your life's journey and career, about these companies or organizations you started, one of them being Represent Me. What was that one about, and what was the goal of it and what it meant to you?
So Represent Me was a not-for-profit that I started while I was working on my PhD. And I often say that the best thing to do while you're doing a PhD is anything other than that PhD. It's so appealing to do anything else. And so I was like, let's start a not-for-profit. That sounds really good. So I did that. I did that with my best friend and a few of our kind of coworkers and various colleagues and stuff that we knew. And essentially it started because I was doing my studies in representation of queer identity in traditional fiction. And I was doing my teaching work at the university in game design and game studies. And I started to get really curious about the intersection between those two things. So queer representation and games and how that kind of existed. And this was back in 2013, 2014. So there was actually very little academic research in the field of queer identity in games at that stage. Adrienne Shaw is now kind of one of the leading researchers in that space, but her and I kind of independently started dabbling in this sort of cataloging of queer identities in games and, tracking how that has changed over time around that same time. And we found each other and went, oh, wait, you're doing this too? And we started sharing our research with each other and our documentation. And she's gone on to be she was already doing amazing work in ethics in games and representation, but she's gone on to really focus in that queer game space. And she's done some really amazing work there while I went and started making games and kind of disappeared out of the academy for a bit. But yeah, it was very much just an exploration of the intersecting point between these two areas that I was engaged in and finding a gap and thinking, oh, I wonder what's going on here. And that expanded into us, supporting at first queer developers in the industry. Then it expanded to all marginalized developers in the industry, realizing that there was a lot of need for support in a bunch of ways. And so we did that in, everything from offering scholarships to training workplaces to consulting on games to make sure that they were more authentic and appropriate and not problematic. And then all of that experience kind of led to me ultimately getting that diversity, equity, inclusion management job and working at Sledge in that role and bringing together a lot of those experiences for a AAA studio, which was unreal.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's definitely a clear line in between those two projects and coming into this management role at Sledge. Would you say there's also a connection to your work as a producer? Like, where's the through line there, if you could speak to it?
I think that teaching and production are basically the same job. It's so much about communication. It's so much about managing time. It's about making sure that all the deadlines are really clear, all the tasks are really clear, that, everyone's on the same page. And like, that is exactly the same thing that I was doing when I was teaching students. I was essentially project managing them, especially when they were doing like capstone projects and developing games. I was almost exactly their producer during that experience, checking in with them, seeing how they were going, seeing if they were on task, if their scope was right, like all that stuff. So I feel like between my teaching experience and then my experience, like literally running a business and working out like what tasks do we have to do and when are they due and who is assigned to them, and let me manage all of these tasks either in a spreadsheet or on Trello or whatever platform we're using. That was essentially a project management job as well. And so I think it was quite transferable to kind of come into a games production space and say, hey, like, I know a lot about games. I know a lot about running timelines and schedules. I know a lot about maintaining spreadsheets. I know, all the kind of independent individual skills that are needed for this role. Give me a chance and let me put them all together and show you what I can do. And I was really lucky someone, heard that and went, yep, cool, let's give that a crack. And, helped me kind of get the exact word of producer on my resume, I guess, because that is sometimes half the battle. And then, I got to kind of go into Sledge and continue to work in that space. But I think all of the skills were things I was already doing across a bunch of different places.
Yeah.
So it's always so interesting to me because we've had a lot of people now come on who've had the producer role and go on to do different things, but it really is kind of this catch-all. You have to be this multi-talented person. Like, you have to be able to teach, you have to be able to listen, you have to be able to organize, and like, you are the jack of all trades holding it all together often. So it takes a certain type of person to be a producer.
Yeah, and I think producers are all really different from each other as well. And different projects require different producers, or different projects require a mix of different producers. I know when I was working on Call of Duty, I had, like, I was typically like a level producer. And so I was running a level alongside other producers who were also running their own levels. And we did a really good job of relying on each other and calling on each other for each other's skill sets. So some of us were really charismatic and really good at having a conversation with a stakeholder. And we might say, oh, hey, could you have a word to such and such for me? Because you're better at that than I am. And then someone else would be really good at creating the spreadsheet template, and they'd go and share that with everyone so that everyone's asset lists were better because they'd made some great change that updated a formula to make it more effective or whatever. So I think that producers come in all shapes and sizes, and we work better when we work together.
Yeah.
We work better when we work together. I
I think that could apply in a lot of places, couldn't it?
It could,
So
but
true.
yeah, teamwork makes the dream work, as they say. And then I was curious, would you say Represent Me was a good segue into your new project, Beacon and Briar?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm currently co-director of a company called Beacon and Briar. It is in many ways similar to what Represent Me was doing in that it offers consultation services, it offers, research services. We're doing a bunch of work in the DE&I space, but I've learned a lot of lessons in terms of how to set up the company, how to manage the company, just logistical stuff in terms of how much overhead a not-for-profit is versus a for-profit company, those sorts of things. And so I've kind of gone into it with a very different mindset, which has just helped from a stress and workload perspective. But a lot of the individual kind of tasks and things that we're trying to do are quite similar.
Nice. And now I want to dive in deeper into what it was like being the head of DEI, because I know that was a big project for you, and I'm sure you had a lot of learnings. But what would you say your biggest takeaway was? And then we can go from there.
Oh, that's a big question. I think I think the biggest takeaway would be that people can achieve really amazing things when they're given the trust and freedom to work in their area of expertise and make things happen. I think that so much of what I was able to do at Sledgehammer in their DE&I department came from the amount of trust I was able to foster fairly early on with people, including, high level directors, stakeholders, but also just the team more broadly. And obviously that was something that I put work into. It was something that I had to kind of try very hard to establish, but it was also just something I was given and was really grateful to be given by some key leaders. And that allowed me to have the space to try things, have those things not necessarily always work, be able to justify why I took a risk, what I learned from the outcome, try something else. There was never a feeling that, oh, if I try this one thing and it doesn't work, all of it will be taken away from me. I was given the space to experiment because there was a lot of knowledge that I was working in an area that hadn't necessarily been done the way we wanted to do it before. That there are certain ways in which DE&I is done across the world. There are certain expectations or stereotypes about that, and I wanted to break all of them and do it a better way and do it a different way. And that comes with a level of risk. It comes with a level of experimentation. And I was very, very grateful that I could say, this is what I want to do. This is why I want to do it. And people went, okay, give it a go. Let us know if it works. I would not have been able to achieve anywhere near what I did without that level of trust and freedom. And it's something I want to be able to afford other people now that I've had that experience, because I want to see what other people can do with that space when I'm managing and supporting them as well.
That's awesome. So big takeaways are sort of building trust, working from your expertise and allowing people to work from theirs. Is there anything else that you say would be sort of the high level takeaways from this position?
I also think one of the things I used to say when I was in that role is that I could make anything a DE&I problem if I wanted it to be. And that mostly just comes from the fact that I genuinely think that having a more diverse and inclusive team, having a more equitable team, having people feel like they belong to a space is so significant to the way that we work, that I could look at any issue across the studio and understand the ways in which it impacted people who were marginalized in different and more nuanced ways, and think, okay, cool, how do we fix this so that it helps everyone and raises up our marginalized people, but also raises up everybody else? And I think that approach, that really holistic approach to DE&I, is part of the reason that we could build so much trust, because we did have people looking at the work that we were doing and realizing it wasn't just, let's put some event on for Pride Month and it's only for the queer folk in the studio. It was, let's do manager training that supports every single manager in our studio, because ultimately that has a flow-on effect that will help everyone, including our marginalized team members. And people went, oh, okay, I get it now. And I think that approach it was really cool to be able to put that into practice and see how it worked. And that was one of the big takeaways, I think, for me as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's really important. I'm thinking of DE&I initiatives that I've seen at nonprofits mostly, that are mostly let's build a resource group and then give them $200 and then never talk about it again, versus how do we incorporate everybody into creating solutions, taking into account that we can see from a lot of views if we get a lot of input, but we might not be able to see from everybody's. And also, we want to make sure that everybody is uplifted and empowered within the space. Yeah.
Last question on DEI in AAA. What, not that you're the one expert and the only person who knows anything about it, but from your experience and your expertise with, I guess, the current everythingness of the world, do you think DEI still has a place in offices, or is it just something that needs to be inherently built into the structure?
I mean, it's a complicated and difficult question, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I live in Australia, which means I don't get the direct impact of certain administrative changes that have happened in the US in recent times. But also the US is such a global superpower that it's hard to avoid the impact that it has on, international climates. I think that DE&I initiatives have always and will always have a place in workplaces and all aspects of society. They've been called different things throughout history, and they will continue to be called different things throughout history. And just because a specific trend in terms of terminology is shifting or changing doesn't mean that suddenly marginalized people don't need support. Obviously, there are a group of people who have not been given adequate support over historical times for a whole bunch of different reasons. And the only way to fix that is by offering additional support now. And that's going to stay the same regardless of what we call it. I think that it's going to be a very, very difficult time for a while now. Like, there are literally laws preventing workplaces from having explicit DE&I programs and things within their companies at the moment in the US. We're actually at Beacon and Briar doing research at the moment into trends around shareholder reports between 2019 and 2025 and what games companies have been putting out to their shareholders in regards to DE&I and how that's ebbed and flowed. And it's really interesting. We're starting to dig into some trends there and understand what has changed in terms of what companies are willing to tell their shareholders. And obviously that's different to what companies are willing to do or what companies are willing to tell their audiences. It's like very different audience, very different group of people that they're talking to. And so just kind of tracking some of that is already quite fascinating. But I think at the core of it, we can call it DE&I, we can call it something else. We can outlaw DE&I programs, we could do whatever, but it's not going to change the fact that there are going to be queer people and women and gender diverse people and people with disabilities and neurodivergent people and people of various ethnicities and et cetera, in workplaces where those things are therefore giving them a different experience for good and for bad. And we need to be aware of that and adapt accordingly. That's at the core of it, what it's all about.
I'm really curious how, like, just from a logistics point of view, where do you get these shareholder reports from?
So any public company in the US has to lodge them with the SEC. So they're actually publicly available reports. You can look them up for any publicly listed company. So any company that has shares and offers those to the public has to file shareholder reports every year.
Awesome.
You could be reading these for fun, Marv. Like, just
I
go online.
could.
That's essentially what I am doing, yes.
You see, I do a similar thing, like working in nonprofits in the US, like they'll have 990s and it's pretty easy to get them. So like that's how I do my research. So I'm understanding there's a similar entity where I could be looking through these, and that's fascinating.
Yeah, it's exactly the same premise. So privately listed companies might put up some sort of report, but it's optional. Publicly listed companies, so ones that have shares attached to them, have to put up a shareholder report every year. It's exactly the same sort of thing as not-for-profit reporting. It's obviously a little bit different country to country. So we are looking at US and non-US companies, and their requirements around their reporting is a little bit different. And where you get those reports from is a little bit different, but they are available. You can find them.
Well, we must be active, not reactive. It's the time. I love that. Well, thank you. Sharing knowledge, that's the goal.
Yeah.
I'd love to pivot to some of your other independent projects. I want to know more about Cozy Chaos Crafts and what has been sparking joy on this new journey for you of like doing witchy things.
Yeah, so I think being in AAA for as long as I was and probably not being as in touch with my hobbies and my, who I am outside of my work. As soon as I left AAA, I realized I actually need to do something that is not games and is not work so that I feel healthy and sane. And so one of those things is I started, I guess, a company, but I'm kind of reluctant to call it that because I'm trying to avoid it feeling like work. But I started something called Cozy Chaos Crafts, which is essentially just a market stall that I do sometimes, or a brand that I use for things like tarot readings at festivals and stuff like that. It's not related to games at all. It will never be related to games at all. And I will never care enough about it that it is paying my bills. This is all very important to me. It needs to stay fun.
Right.
So
Yes.
it is something I do that is joyful. It just also needed a name because otherwise you can't sign up for markets or get public liability insurance. So it has a
True.
name.
Okay.
Fair, fair. It seems very fun and like a good way to connect to your community, which is important.
Yeah, it's been really nice just having something where, I did a market last weekend. I got to spend time with people who don't have anything to do with the games industry, which was delightful for a weekend, and who were doing things like one of them was a perfumer full time, and she grows her own materials and creates her own perfumes and then sells them at markets, and that's her full time job. And yeah, I create art and make prints, and I bring my books with me, and I, do crochet and various other things, and I sell sticker sheets that I designed and all sorts of stuff at these markets. I get to chat with people who otherwise I wouldn't ever get to see.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, even things like I don't sell any of my art online because I don't really feel like dealing with shipping costs or going to a post office regularly. That feels like work. So anything that feels like work,
Right.
I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to do it. I'm just doing
I
the
love
fun
that.
bits.
Love that. I want to talk about another project. Forgive me if I say this wrong. Queerly Ever After? Is
Yeah.
that I am in love. I found it. It was like, oh, finally somebody's writing these queer fairy tales. Obviously, the point of this thesis is that you're not the only person doing it, and there's a lot to draw on from both sort of traditional folk stories as well as newly adapted or stories that have come into the zeitgeist. And I noticed that you used Tumblr to talk about queer identity, and so
Sorry, Marv
Go
loves
in.
Tumblr, so this is very exciting for them.
this is very exciting for me. And I'm just wondering what that process is like. Like the
So let me give
analysis
you a little
that goes
context,
into.
right? So Queerly Ever After was my PhD thesis. It's what I actually used to get my PhD. And it's a collection of short stories, which you can actually buy as a book now. And then also is a like deep kind of theoretical analysis of fairy tales and queer identity and all these things. And like you said, like I use Tumblr, I use a bunch of other blogs and other kind of platforms where people talk about their identities to understand more about people's identities so that I could embed that very kind of believable personality and character traits and things like that into the characters I was creating. Because obviously I'm a queer woman, but I'm only one perspective. And so I was using that as a way of getting other people's perspectives and tone of voice and experiences and adapting those into something that felt real and felt believable. And it was something that was really interesting while I was doing my thesis, because this was, a decade ago. It wasn't something people were doing very much of, like finding academic ways of interpreting very non-academic sources and
Right.
using them as inspiration for work like this. So I actually wrote a paper that I could then use as a justification for my work. So I got a peer-reviewed paper published that was around using things like this and discourse analysis and understanding the discourses that people have on the internet and analyzing those in order to understand people and community. And I got to present that at a conference. And so I got to actually stand up at a conference in front of a bunch of fancy people and talk about Tumblr. So you'll probably enjoy that as a fun nerdy fact.
I love that.
Yeah, it
When
was
I
a lot of
wrote
fun.
my thesis, I kept arguing. Well, I didn't argue. No hate to Scott Critch. She's the best. My thesis advisor. I kept being like, Scott, why can't I use Twitter as a source? Because some people were having great takes and they supported my argument. Just because they're not like a published paper doesn't make it like not real. And just like the idea of like, I don't know. I don't have the words for it. So I haven't been in academia in a while. But like the idea that just because you're published doesn't make you more valid than a non-published person. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I
There's a
think it depends
queerness
a
in
lot
that
on
too.
I think there's a lot of variation depending on what it is you're saying, right? So if someone was defining an academic term and they were doing it in a peer-reviewed paper versus on Twitter, I'd probably believe one of those over the other. But if someone was telling me what it's like to be a queer person, I don't need them to be in a peer-reviewed journal, you know? And so
Exactly.
I think it very much depends on the topic. And that is what I was trying to kind of explain with this paper that I ended up writing, because I had similar pushback, not from my supervisor, but from some of his kind of not co-supervisors, but he was getting advice and feedback from others as part of the process of me doing my thesis. And there was a little bit of pushback of just not understanding, just not like being, I guess, connected to this space enough to understand what I was trying to do and why. And I concocted the plan basically with my supervisor, who is an absolute champ, to be like, if I can word this in a way that is academic enough that it gets peer reviewed and published as a process that I should be using for my work, can I then use that as a justification within my PhD? And he was like, absolutely. And so I did. And I wrote that paper, I got it submitted, got it published, and then could use that to justify my work as opposed to having to pivot and go a different direction. Yeah. So that was my cheeky way of fixing that.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah. I love it.
I wish I had had this paper to refer to when I was in my own college experience.
It would have gone so well with my paper, because I think what you wrote was very similar to my paper, which was like the importance of queer representation in animated content. So not that different.
Yeah, pretty similar.
Yeah.
But yeah, arguing a lot of just trying to find sources that didn't feel like, it was so hard to find the right, I don't know, papers to reference.
I think academic papers as well are often very delayed in when they come out because of the way the academic process works, and queer identity and the queer community moves incredibly quickly. And so there'll be papers describing terminology and saying what is kind of best words to use for certain groups of people that are, came out this year but are years out of date because they started being written years ago. And should you be trusting that, or should you be trusting someone on a blog post who is having this conversation right now? And so my argument was for, currency and understanding that things needed to be recent to be accurate. And yeah, thankfully I got away with quite a lot just because I managed to make it sound reasonable in academic.
Amazing. Do you have any final words of advice for upcoming people who want to work in DEI professionally or want to be a writer, just aspiring game people?
A lot of people who are interested in working in a game space or in a DE&I space, I think, are very focused on the long-term career aspect of that. And sometimes I wish I could tell people to take a step back and just think about what sounds interesting to them next, because whatever you do next is going to completely change what you want to do after that anyway. The number of things I've done in my life because I didn't even know they existed until I did step A, and then I went, oh, I'm going to do that for step B because I didn't even know that was there until I started on step A. I think that if you get too bogged down in understanding what the next 30 years of your life is going to look like, you close a lot of doors to yourself before you've even looked at what's through them. And I think that in an industry like this, and by that I mean both the games industry and the DE&I industry, they both move so quickly, they both change so often, they both ebb and they flow a lot. So you'll end up with spaces where everybody is thinking about DE&I because of social events or political events that have occurred, or no one is thinking about it and everyone's running away from it. Same with games, where you have areas where, there's a lot of money in the industry, something like COVID happens and suddenly everyone's playing video games and it's a boom. And then you have global financial crisis and everyone's being laid off. And none of those things is constant. None of those things is forever. And if you're trying to think about what your 30 to 50-year plan is for your career, you can't adapt to all of those different things. You can't know they're coming. And so think about what the next thing is that interests you, and then go there, do that, and let the universe keep giving you opportunities and opening doors to you. And don't be afraid to walk through them because it doesn't align with your giant lifelong plan that you made for yourself. Because I think, it closes you off to some really amazing opportunities. And I wouldn't have had half the career I've had if I thought that I knew what I was going to do from the get-go, because all the really cool things that I've ever done have just sort of appeared to me as what about this? And I'm like, oh, I didn't know that was an option, but yeah, all right, let's give that a crack.
I think that's beautiful advice. And me, not speaking for anyone else other than myself, I'm probably going to hold that to my chest for a little bit, because as I look for work, I think right now I'm going to just lean into what looks interesting versus part of it, like, I have to stay sane and, there's
Mm.
gotta find joy in that too, because
Absolutely.
I can't follow my plan, like you said, there's too many things I can't control.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think it's even really common with students where if you're if you're not even in the industry yet and you're thinking about getting into it, you'll end up with students being like, okay, do I go to this university? Do I go to that university? Do I do an online course? Do I do vocational study? Do I do like whatever? And my advice for that is always like, just do what interests you. If you look at a university degree and you think I would rather die, then don't do it. It's not like sure, there are some companies that won't want to hire you unless you have a certain piece of paper. But if you're making choices about your own career based on an assumption or a guess about what a company is going to want from you 4 years down the track, you're just going to put yourself through an unpleasant experience for 4 years. And then whatever those expectations are will be different now anyway. And so, like, whoops, bad luck. So do the thing that interests you. And if what interests you most is making your own projects in your own living room and doing an online course for a bit, start there. And if something occurs to you where you're like, oh, well, I'd really like to actually do a degree, do a degree. And if you want to do it part-time because you also want to be doing something cool on the side, then do that. Like, don't try and map your career and your choices and your studies on what you think other people want from you because
Yeah.
they will let you down.
Yeah. Get a
That's true.
bachelor's in philosophy. Nobody can stop you.
Absolutely. Do it. Lean in. If that's what brings you joy, go and
Yeah.
do it.
We're gonna get so many philosophy majors out of this podcast, Marv. They're gonna start emailing us like, "You inspired me. I'm a philosophy major."
I don't know how I would have done that.
And if
Like,
you
I
make
feel
it
like
like you're at university and you want to be a philosophy major anyway, there's some great YouTube videos. Just go start watching those and become
So true.
a fake philosophy major. That's also fine.
yeah.
Like, follow your joy, you know?
So many video essays on YouTube. Those
Yeah.
are my bread and butter. Well, thank you so much, Alana. It's been wonderful chatting with you. We're really grateful you took the time.
It's okay.
Yes.
My pleasure. I will always talk someone's ear off if they want to hear about the various things I'm passionate about. So, more than happy to come and hang out.
Yeah.
And we're so happy that you agreed to. This has been such a fun conversation. I will look into your paper and then also shareholder reports. I've gotten so much information out of this conversation. It's wonderful.
And I'm pretty sure
Yes.
that almost all of the things we talked about, like papers I've written and theses and all that stuff, is just like freely available on the internet. Like, I've not been particularly gatekeepery about any of it. And so, unless it's like owned by a publisher who wants to be able to make money off me, it's generally just freely available on the internet. So, if people Google my name, they can find various things that we have discussed.
Yes.
Amazing. We'll put it in the show notes so people can even easier get it. It'll be great. Thank you so much. Have fun with your homework, Marv. Reading your reports and essays. Thank you so much, Alana. That was our conversation with Alana. Bwah, bwah, bwah.
I feel like I just met somebody whose brain is so big and huge, beautiful, gifted, talented. What
Yeah? Are you gonna be okay? Do you need to lie down?
I would love to lie down, but I've actually slept a lot today, so I
That's
can't.
nice.
I
No,
shan't.
Alana's lovely. I remember when we worked at Sledge at the same time, every time Alana came on, like, a town hall, everyone would be like, "Alana," like, chant. Just so exciting because they're the best. Just like in
That's
the
so
Zoom chat.
lovely. I want that.
We love her. She's very smart, and I'm jealous of all the students who get to take classes.
I'm never gonna be interested in the narrative design of, video games, but they must be having a lot of fun.
Yeah, they gotta be. And if they listen to the podcast, they get extra credit,
Yep.
probably. Or at least Sing students do. If anyone's listened to the Sing episode, don't forget you get extra credit. Or back.
Throwback.
Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, leave a review, something nice. I would love to read a review from a stranger.
Yeah.
Actually, I haven't checked. I don't know how to check. But next time, I'll come back with updates if we have reviews.
We have a beautiful review from Mr. Michael C. Hill.
Oh my gosh.
You should
Okay.
read it.
So exciting. So yeah, leave reviews like Michael Hill and tell your friends to listen. Our cover art is by Les, and this podcast is edited by Marv, our very own Marv. And remember,
there's
not
one
right
way
to realize that there is a career in games.
There's not one right way to start a not-for-profit while doing your PhD.
And there's not one right way to start as a producer and then become the head of DEI at a AAA studio. Thanks so much for listening.
Bye!
Bye.